Coaches have a huge impact on the lives of young people, and every coach should have an athletic code of conduct. Coaches are responsible to show the way to their student athletes and how to carry their lives. It's very important that they understand that drugs, alcohol have no place in athletics. To be a successful student athlete, you can't be an average person. You're a student athlete. You have to be above average. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard. Prior to the start of each season, we send out our code of conduct with a letter that our student athletes sign. They read the code of conduct with their parents so they fully know their expectations. And student athletes in violation of the code of conduct have to understand the consequences. One, it can be miss game time, miss a whole season. Two, it could affect them financially. They could lose their work-study job. They could even lose their scholarship. Three, if they're misbehaving and have bad character in residence halls, the college could decide to throw them off campus. And four, ultimately, you get thrown out of school. Student athletes, student comes first, and they have to hold themselves accountable in all aspects of their lives. Student athletes have to understand the athletic code doesn't end at the end of their season. Once you sign by the code, live by the code.
In Skinny Atlas, New York, high school athlete Matthew Angelillo lettered in 2 sports, football and lacrosse. At the end of his junior year, Matt attended a summer seminar at the Air Force Academy, where he had hoped to be accepted and play lacrosse. It was graduation time and the end of lacrosse season. For some, this is a time to abandon the code, which prohibits underage drinking. Steve, his friend and star of the track team, had his father's red Ferrari for the night. Steve's father didn't know he drank. Matt was usually designated driver, but left his car home so he could celebrate. After a party in the woods, he got in the car with Steve and didn't care Steve was drinking. When you drink, you don't think. Matt was posthumously admitted to the Air Force Academy, the day of his funeral.
I was in disbelief when I found out. Came over here to the school, and it's amazing to see how different people react to tragedy like that. Some people were sobbing and crying. Some were just standing there in shock with just blank stares in their face. Some of the kids, and coaches as well, some of the kids were down in the field. They were trying to get together and just telling stories they remember of Matt and things they had done with him, trying to remember happier times. I think you tend to do that just to try to make yourself feel better and try to make light of the situation. But there was a wide variety of emotions that were going on that day, all of which were just trying to deal with the crash and the tragedy that had happened. I think it's kind of ironic how alcohol is part of our athletic culture, the commercials, the sponsorships, the drinking going on at professional college sporting events. Given the fact that it is so prevalent, that it is out there, that their friends are doing it, it's very easy for them to just slide into the mindset of, I'm going to do it too because it's what's accepted and it's what's out there.
It seems that alcohol is a rite of passage in our society, and that these student athletes see their parents drinking. They go to sports games and they see everyone at the event drinking and in the parking lots headed to the game, and they think that that's the acceptable thing to do. That's what they're supposed to do. And unfortunately, the media and our society has given the message to these young people that they should be drinking beer and when they go to a game, or partying when they go out. That's what they're supposed to do.
All our coaches, our athletic directors, our administrators, we have a no drinking policy, no drug policy during the sports seasons. And we harp on the kids. I did when I was a coach. I said, look, remember, you're on the code. You're on the code. You're on the code.
The message that the professionals are trying to give to these students is that one night of heavy drinking undoes 2 weeks of training. And so I've said to my daughter, I've emailed her the information, this is true. And why undo all that effort to excel at a sport? Why risk harming your body, your heart, the way your body performs? Why work so hard to bring it to a fine-tuned machine and then to undo it due to drinking? And that's the conflict in athletics. For one student or one member of the team to take the risk and break the athletic code and have to miss 3 games, it definitely affects the entire potential of the team. And especially when you're at the end of the season and every game counts, you're now up against the best of the best and you're in playoffs. And this is the time for the teams especially to come together and respect each other as players.
A lot of the athletes that are going to college now, Division I, Division II, even Division III, they're getting some kind of scholarship, financial aid, whatever the package might be. And drinking, now they're away from their parents. Drinking is even more acceptable in college. Unfortunately, accepted by the student athletes. And with them drinking in college the way they are, I had a personal experience of my roommate failing out because of drinking. Or you get into some kind of alcohol problem where your coach finds out. Next thing you know, you're losing your scholarship, losing your financial aid, losing your on-campus job, and you're booted. And that's essentially, when you're playing college sports, it's like having a job. I mean, they're paying you to come there and perform and essentially work for that college. Something's got to change. Somebody's got to be willing to step up and make a difference and start changing the mindset of drinking, not only during sports season, but out of sports season anytime as young adults, because you're in the position where there's so many things going on in your life, so many things you're worrying about, that you don't always have the best judgment yet. You're still making poor decisions. And I think it's important for kids to understand that they need to just listen to the adults, look at the tragedies that have happened, and somewhere it's got to sink in and somebody's got to make a difference.
Getting into a car with a drunk friend is as bad as drinking and driving, because you are putting everyone at risk. Matt and Stephen actually hit a minivan with a young couple in it, and they saw their life pass before their very eyes. They could have been killed in this horrific tragedy also. Historically, society does decide to change, and you get to situations where society doesn't want to tolerate certain behavior anymore, and the more parents that I see being affected by underage drinking, binging, drug use, the more awareness will take place that we as a society can change the rules early on. We can change athletic codes. We can be stricter enforcing athletic codes. We can educate young parents so that they are warned ahead of time on how to successfully raise a teenager who's drug and alcohol free.
Steve grew up in a dry house, and that place was stripped bare. There wasn't any alcohol in there at all. And there was a bond, a deep, strong bond that was broken that night. And I actually got a call in the middle of the night, and I was asleep, I heard Steve's dad's voice, and it was devastated. His life had ended. And I fell back to sleep thinking, oh, that was just a dream. And then I woke up in the morning, I got down to the phone, and there was this message of the crash and how Steve's life had just been ruined. He'd killed his best friend, and his dad was just sobbing. I don't know, it's tough to, go through days when that's always in your head, and it haunts you. I don't think I've ever gotten my arms wrapped around this, and I don't think I ever will.
I consider the off season the deadliest season. To me, I think you say you're on the code, meaning they're not going to drink, remember the code, don't get in trouble. You say that, it's almost like as soon as the season's over, they're like, oh, we're off the code. Now we can drink because we're no longer on the code. Maybe they don't have somebody looking over them 24/7. Maybe their parents aren't quite aware of what they're doing. And then you go from the sports season to the so-called deadly season where they're off the code and they feel like they can drink, party, go out on the boat, drive, whatever. And that's where, unfortunately, a lot of the tragedies happen. And that's the part that we, a lot of times, can't control as much as we'd like to be able to control.
On the field, athletes make mistakes. It's part of the game. Off the field, if they make mistakes, they're all alone. When you drink, you don't think. In Jasper, New York, Tiara Odell was beginning her senior year. A tenacious defender, Tiara was the captain of the Lady Jasper soccer team and had just been voted homecoming queen. Friday night, she went to the dance. Saturday afternoon, she had a soccer game against her rivals. The homecoming queen never made it to the game.
On a September evening, on a Friday night, a bunch of kids coming from a homecoming dance decided that this rural road was going to be the spot for their after party. That party took place sometime around after midnight, and sometime around 2 a.m., the young lady who was crowned as the homecoming queen climbed in a car with 3 other young men to leave to get a ride to go get something to eat and to go home. They made it as far as the local store and shortly thereafter, their car plummeted off a bridge, killing all 4 of them. Each of the 4 people in that car were under the influence of an alcoholic beverage. And the reason that there was a search for that vehicle just happened that she didn't show up for her soccer game that day. And when the kids realized in a panic that it was very unlike her not to show up for that game, they went to the coach, they went to the principal, and they told everyone that there had been a party and they were not sure where these people were at. After talking to the coach and the principal immediately called me, being the former school resource officer. I immediately asked them to notify 911 and start a search for those kids. This was on Saturday afternoon, and the crash site was not located until late Monday afternoon. This crash site is on a state highway not far from this location, a heavily traveled road throughout the daytime, but because of where their car ended up, it took 3 days for anyone to see that car in that creek.
Each of our athletes here in a small community where there's not a lot of options of what they can do are faced with the challenge of, do I go to a party where there's alcohol involved, or do I not do that? And they're all taught not to do that, but sometimes the peer pressure and the challenges are too hard to deny, I guess. I was just really surprised that that was the choice that she made that night.
Tiara wasn't really that kind of person, but it was her senior year and a lot of her friends were going, and it was her last homecoming. She wanted to have fun, so I could see that's why she went. She wanted to have fun. It was her senior year.
The last thing that I said to the girls before they left practice that night was to be careful and to be safe. She had the choice to not get in that car. I was very surprised because of the importance of the game the very next day that she ever got into that kind of situation. Soccer was much too important to her, I believed, to put herself in that kind of situation.
It was getting dark and the boys' JV game was ending, and I remember walking over and they were all the David's mom and Joey's mom and Tiara's friends were all over there, and they're all talking about how they didn't show up for the game and where they could have been. And when I realized that they hadn't been finding Jared, I remember one of my closest friends and her mom came walking across the field from her cross-country meet, and I remember just like bawling and running into her arms like, they can't find my brother. And that's about all I remember from that day.
The irony of this vehicle landing where it did, less than 100 yards from 2 family residences, one on either side, and still not being found until Monday afternoon, is just due to the fact that it was just virtually camouflaged amongst the trees and the rocks as it was laying on almost nearly on its roof.
She really wanted to go to these parties and be with her friends. I mean, these were where her friends were going to be. So for Tiara to do this was not like her. And I can honestly say, I don't think she had ever been intoxicated. Maybe she'd been with somebody and had tasted of it, knew what it was, but she had never come home that I knew of that she had been drinking. Soccer was so important to her. She wanted to go on and play college soccer. A scout from Lemoyne College came down to watch Tiara play at one of her games, and then she was going to set up for Tiara to go up and play with the team so they could watch her play up there and see how she would react. I just think this was one of those things that they do and think they could get away with it once, and then after all, everybody was going out that night. It was homecoming night. Everybody had all these big plans, and it just goes to show that only takes once.
She was a driving force of our soccer team, and as a captain and as a beloved friend, it was devastating to all of us that her one mistake caused so much pain for everyone.
Dreams are crushed. Scholarships disappear. Lives disappear. These are the consequences of bad decisions. Jonathan Mueller ran cross-country in high school and lived by the athletic code. At the college level, Jonathan ran at SUNY Cobleskill and honored his commitment to the code. But a repeat drunk driver had his own code of irresponsibility. Jonathan awoke from a coma with a traumatic brain injury, and he has no memory, no past, and an extremely challenging future.
I was attending school at SUNY Cobleskill, and I was driving to pick up Chinese food for dinner. I was driving my Saab with two friends. We were all buckled up, and I was hit by a drunk driver. The driver hit my side of the car. I went into a coma immediately from the whiplash, from my head moving forward and back. I have short-term memory. In reference, that means when I get home, I might not remember that I presented a speech to the senior class here. So I have short-term memory loss, and it's very aggravating and frustrating, but I have made tools for myself to get over that, like carrying a notebook with me, and I have a cell phone with a recorder on it. I give speeches, and when I am done with like my half-hour presentation, I make everyone listening say a pledge, raise their right hand, and it's like the Pledge of Allegiance, and I have them promise me with all their heart that they will never drink and drive, let their friends drink and drive, or get into a car with a naive, horrible man or woman who's been drinking. And I hope and pray that that will stay in their mind when difficult times come. I, Jonathan, promise to never drink and drive. I promise to do my best to stop someone from drinking and driving. I promise to do my best to stop someone from drinking and driving. You hope for the best. And I hope that these kids are at a mature enough age to make the right decision. It's too late to say you're sorry when the damage is done. I don't want no apologies from anyone. From anyone.